Rivalry Saturday lived up to the hype where USA-Canada started with a bunch of fireworks. USA advances. And what can we expect on Monday?
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, February 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Monoman12. Follow show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. You can follow the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You can do that all on FanDuel. So, what an incredible Saturday night at the Four Nations where Team USA defeats the Canadians by a final score of 3-1, and Finland gets an overtime win over Sweden. So now it sets up the USA in the final, where now they're for Canada, Sweden, and Finland, 2 points in the standings for them with a big Monday night coming. USA loses Matthew Tkachuk in the last 12 minutes right before their win. And in a game where we just saw the viewership numbers before recording this podcast, 4.4 million viewers across North America for this. And here to break down the Rivalry Saturday here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we have an American here and also a Canadian on the other side. Please, let's welcome in from the Cats and Rats podcast, Calgary native Florida Panthers fan, Kirby Lupul. Kirby, welcome to the show, my friend.
How's it going, Armando? Before we start here, usually invite me on for good moments here. You know, talk about the Paul Maurice Masterclass, talk about the Stanley Cup, the Matthew Tkachuk trade, review things like that. But as a Canadian resident, a little tough day here, but my American counterparts had fun with me last night on our Cats and Rats After Dark there over on the YouTube side. So as I say always, I show up win or loss, and I'm always going to be like that as a Panther fan, always be like that for when I'm supporting my nation as well.
Yeah, and obviously this was something that we planned before the puck even dropped for us. So virtually
Right.
a handshake, a GG for both of us here. So this game started with we'll talk mostly about the USA Canada first, and then we'll get to Sweden Finland a little later in the show. But booze from the beginning, obviously, with what's going on in our political climate, and then the fights at the beginning with JT Miller, Colton Parayko, 9 seconds after everything that happened with Matthew Tkachuk, Brandon Hagel, and then Brady Tkachuk and Sam Bennett, and then them talking about it after the game, how it was something that, although it was premeditated, I mean, talk about a way for if someone were to tune in to hockey for the first time and then knowing international best on best, what a great impression that this could have even left on for someone just getting into the sport.
Yeah. Again, my dad, he was 1 or 2 levels away from playing in the NHL. So he played in the 60s and early 70s. So brought me back to those memories that my dad would talk about way before my time, way before your time, Armando. So it's definitely a big pull towards like the new hockey fans, everything that you see out there on social media. You talked about like the political climate outside of hockey, obviously playing into this and different things like this. But I grew up on Canada, Russia, and then the very beginning stages and era of Canada and USA hockey. And it's sad that we have not seen best on best in 8-10 years. And it's something I talked about with our community. This is not going to be an all-star game. There is going to be juice to this event. And I thought from puck drop, and we saw that in the first Canada-Sweden game, McKinnon lays a hit, draws a penalty. You see Canada score on that power play. You see what USA and Finland look like, very close contested battle. And then they really turned it on there in the third period. And it's like, okay, like USA, like they're backing up coming into this tournament. Like, hey, this is our time to shine. You've heard it from the Tkachuk brothers. Now the fighting, again, as a Canadian, I don't mind it. I kind of expected it from a guy like Sam Bennett. People are like, is Sam Bennett going to throw down with, the Tkachuks or something like that? I'm like, yeah, like if he's going to have to do something, he'll do it, right? Now with his teammate Matthew, we saw it with Brady there, but that does not surprise me at all. But it's interesting here, Armando, that this was kind of talked about even before warmups. We heard from Dylan Larkin, the Super Bowl party And then we heard about a group chat. So
Mhm.
almost remind me of reality television here when people kind of link up together and like, hey, we're going to do this when we go on this reality show together and stuff. It really brought like reality TV into the hockey arena. And that's just my kind of analogy from all of this. But it sets up for a really good week here ahead. And I'm hoping for a rematch here on Thursday night.
Hoping so. And as far as the game script goes for this one, I mean, Canada getting the early power play for JT Miller getting the 2 minor penalties, and then later on, Connor McDavid going up with speed for him, and then a little bit of a lazy tech by Charlie McAvoy there, but then Charlie McAvoy redeeming himself with that hit back on McDavid that ended in the rush for Jake Gensel, right? As the D was drawing towards Jack Eichel, and to think that Jake Gensel getting that goal and then the empty netter at the end, he led the way with 5 shots on goal. I mean, he's been one of those players who gets buried when it comes to like the discussion because of all the line mates that he's played with. But then even after the McDavid goal, 11 minutes since getting a shot after that for Team Canada. But also some of the other players who stepped up. I mean, I thought Noah Hannafin was outstanding for Team USA. The amount of times that he closed the gap on McDavid, there was a 2-on-1 with him and Sam Reinhart that he slid to get the stick on the ground as well. But on the Canadian side of things, I thought Drew Doughty had a way better game in this one, where he lost a few board battles in the first matchup against Sweden, and then he was the one that nailed the stretch for McDavid. But obviously, there was a mistake that cost Canada with the 2D going on the change. But then we saw some line changes go on for Team Canada, which we saw Crosby not get in on the action. Sam Reinhart was struggle a little bit. We saw McDavid at times with Crosby and Mark Stone. So going to be interesting to see how everything goes together moving forward for Team Canada. And also, let's mention this: that Cale Makar being ill and not playing. Although Thomas Harley was great in his ice time, 10-1 in scoring chances when he was on, you could tell that it was sorely missed for Canada there.
Yeah, I'm a huge Cale Makar fan. He's generational. When fans try to compare other defensemen to him, I think there's only one right now that's in somewhat of that discussion, and it's ironically player that's missing for US here.
Yeah.
Hughes, but that happened before the tournament, so they could kind of set their roster. So Thomas Harley was kind of behind the 8 ball because he wasn't allowed to go on the ice for sanctioned practices. So he had to come on when Makar wasn't out there and whatever he's battling with illness and different things like that. Hopefully, as a Canadian and just as a hockey fan, he's able to play in that game against Finland. And I know we're going to get into the goaltending after, but I went off on John Cooper. As a Panther fan, I can't stand him. I don't understand why Mitch Marner's playing 19 minutes and doing nothing out there. Sam Reinhart in the game before can't find a shift in overtime. They end up pulling it out. It's Mitch Marner that scores a goal. But remember, everyone, it's 3-on-3. Mitch Marner looks good 3-on-3. But when playoffs come, we know as Panther fans, he disappears. So a guy like Brad Marchand that you didn't mention had a great game against Sweden. He gets like 6 minutes after 40 minutes, and you got Mitch Marner getting double, triple the time of ice time that Brad Marchand has. You have Braden Point, who, as Panther fans, I think we have to admit, he's a very skilled, talented player. He's playing on a Tampa Bay plug and grind line. Like put Point up with McKinnon or with Crosby or with McDavid. And our own Sam Reinhart didn't have a great game there the other night, but he's doing a lot of things defensively well. But I'm having a lot of issues with John Cooper's forward alignments. I know he's shorthanded with Cale Makar in the lineup, but you got to do a much better job of what you're throwing out there with the forwards because you had the Connor McDavid goal and not much else. And I want to give credit to the U.S. That was like Panther-style hockey there throughout the night. After that goal, they just clamped down defensively, shut everything down through the neutral zone. If you know anything about Paul Maurice hockey, that was Mike Sullivan just really mirrored that to Canada and really eliminated and neutralized all the speed that the Canada forwards have, especially at the top of their lineup.
Yeah, and looking at the minutes distribution, I mean, it's so strange to look at a sheet and say that Brad Marchand had only 8 minutes time on ice. Sam Bennett just under 8 for him. I mean, yeah,
he was one of the best Canadian players, Sam Bennett.
Yeah. And to think that inserting into this game and thinking, okay, this is the type of matchup you want against the U.S. for what they were doing here for them, and also, I mean, the fact that once again getting them to the outside and also not the fact that there wasn't really a special teams threat. Yeah, there was the fighting, but only 3 power plays total. So you look at 5-on-5, when you look at the top 6 for Canada, we saw, just like Florida Panthers hockey, outside of the top 6, if you were able to neutralize them, keep them perimeter based, you were able to shut the rest of the lineup down.
Yeah, and I'm like, we watched Connor McDavid very closely in Stanley Cup final last year. I thought he learned a little bit from that final because of how Florida game planned for him, neutralized him for 2-3 games, I believe, in that series where he didn't even garner a point. Yeah, he gets that highlight goal, and everyone's going to talk about that, but I need more from the best player on the planet. Sidney Crosby brings everything in that game against Sweden. Maybe not his best game there. The bad turnover that leads to the nice goal by the U.S. to give them the lead there. Bad line change by Canada as well. But you got to pick up for Crosby. He's 26-0 coming into this game in international competition. Like McKinnon, a really quiet night. McDavid outside of that goal, really quiet night. Mitch Marner, absolute ghost out there. Reinhart, not one of his best nights. So you look, and that was a game for Canada to take from the USA, because I liked some of the stuff Austin Matthews was doing. And you obviously the Tkachuk brothers, Matthew, limited by that injury. But the superstar players for US didn't get off. It was their depth that carried them through. And that was a game where it was a very close 1-goal game where you think, well, if Canada has the best players and generational players, you can find a way to tie that game and win that game. And they don't end up doing that. And we'll get into the goaltending and the other things like that. But that's where your forwards got to try to win you that game. So I put that on the Canada forwards for not winning that game, and the US for really game planning well to shut down those generational and superstar players up front for Canada.
Yeah, and credit to Mike Sullivan for continuing to do so and able to just make the adjustments as there were stretches where they held them just without a lot of pressure on Connor Hellebuyck. And hey, we're seeing what happens when things around the best goaltender in the world are, whenever things are just steady for him. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about the Finland-Sweden game that happened in the afternoon, where Finland gets an overtime win, and now things are a little shaky and a little crazy when it comes to the scenarios going into Monday's game. We'll discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And when the games tip off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine live bets with a same-game parlay. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Segment number 2 here on this Monday, February 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. Here with Kirby Lupul, one of the co-hosts of the Cats and Rats podcast. And Kirby, a 4-3 win for the Finns over Team Sweden. So now we don't have a scenario, even though Team USA clinched their spot in the final. We don't have a scenario that there is a team eliminated before Monday. So that's the great thing about this with Finland's 4-3 overtime win over the Swedes. And credit for Mikael Granlund, struggled mightily, I thought, in the first game against the USA, being on that line with Anton Lundell and Attila Sarainen. All 4 Panthers got at least a point, but there were times in this game where I was just head scratching at some of the decisions that some of the Panthers that we were watching did in this game. I mean, there was one rush that Nico Mikkola drew towards the right, and it left Erik Karlsson open for a one-timer, and then Aleksander Barkov, the Willem Nylander had a stick lift on him that separated the puck, and then he had a pass to Olli Maatta that did not land on his forehand, that resulted in a goal by Mika Zibanejad. Mika Zibanejad had a way better game on Saturday than he did on Wednesday, 6 shots on goal. Adrian Kempe is gonna be recognized in more households after a tournament like this. 3 shots on goal, no goals on this one, but still the speed factor that he brings. Obviously, he plays out west, so not.
And he plays a heavy game that we like too as Panther fans.
Yes. So just overall, we saw a little bit of improvements in Sweden's game despite not getting the result as a win. So now their backs are against the walls here. So, but we saw a 2-on-1 with Lundell and Luosterainen, with Forsling unfortunately being the one due to Rasmus Dahlin's pinch that resulted in Forsling being left on an island.
Yes, that was one of my best traction tweets of this whole week. Just how much I've supported Anton Lundell. You came on our podcast over there. I recommend all fans go listen to it. It ages very well, let's say. I thought Anton Lundell has an argument for that game yesterday against Sweden on the weekend here Saturday, to say that he was the best player on the ice for any player of all 4 nations. That was an unbelievable game. He had something like 3-4 shots on net. He had block shots, hits. He had that big, huge play with Luosterainen. They featured him on Hockey Night in Canada. His defensive plays and prowess. They said this is the best third-line guy in hockey. And I'm kind of saying to myself, yeah, he should be higher up the lineup, playing on a second line, not be the best third-line guy in hockey. If you put Anton Lundell with skill, it's going to be unbelievable. Now, Lusto, he showed some skill there on that nice sauce pass. We don't always get that from Lusto when it comes to offensive instincts. So that was nice that he was able to feed that there to Lundell. But yeah, just with our Panthers, I've been so impressed by the Finns. Barkov, kind of an autopilot Barkov game. I would say A+, but just, steady Barkov like it always is. Avoided that little injury there with the foot. A guy that I'm a little critical of with the Panthers, I don't think he's had a great term, is Gustav Forsling. He's on the ice for a lot of goals against this term, against Canada, against Finland here. I see some teams trying a little bank pass play against him, and they're getting behind him. And I've seen that in the NHL, and now teams are starting to game scout for him because Gustav Forsling's got a ton of headlines, and I think now teams are game planning for him. So you get to see him in a best-on-best situation. Probably not our best Panther out there that has performed in this tournament. Sam Reinhart's another guy that has to pick it up a little bit here as well. But, it's been interesting to see all these Panthers here in every game. And you're going to see a Panther versus Panther in every matchup. You're going to see a Florida Panther win the finals here. But something you didn't mention, and I want to bring to our Panthers fan attention, we don't have Sergei Bobrovsky here in this tournament with Russia sitting out of this tournament. And maybe he wouldn't even be getting starts with how deep Russia is in net. But can our fan base please get off Sergei Bobrovsky's back? There has been some bad goaltending in these 4 nations. Jordan Binnington, Kevin Lankinen, where were you yesterday? Gustavsson, you're yanked after 20 minutes. So that is bad goaltending, Panther fans, what we've seen here in the 4 nations. Now, it's best on best. I understand that. But the goaltending has not stood up to form in the overall scope of this tournament with the scoring chances and opportunities that I feel have been out there. There's been a lot of pucks that have been like, that should have been a save. That should have been a save. The first goal that U.S. scored on Binnington, he's got to have that one. Lankinen, Gustavsson, not a good night, but it made for an entertaining hockey game.
Yeah, and think about how things kind of slowed down a little bit for Sweden after those 2 goals on 4 shots. I mean, think about how opportunistic Sweden was after Ullmark came in. He faced 5 shots on goal in the first 5 minutes, and then Sweden was opportunistic with those 2 goals in the period to even take the lead. And then Finland, good start to the second, good end to the second. So that really let the third period be just continue to be tight, and obviously no goals were scored right before Granlund scored in overtime. But then some line changes happened with Sweden, even for them, which they're non-committal on a goaltender for Monday night, which we'll get into more because we got to talk about scenarios in the third segment. But they went with a line of Raquel with Pettersson and Forsberg, and then they put Kempe up with Zibanejad and Nylander. So talk about Kempe, as we mentioned earlier in the segment, really showing his heavy game and getting rewarded by getting on that top line for Team Sweden. This is something that we mentioned even previewing even before the first game about how the center depth for Sweden isn't necessarily the best here. But
where has Petey been? Where has Petey been? He is an absolute ghost in this tournament.
One shot on goal. One shot on goal on Saturday, and
he had the puck against Finland, but he was turning it over through the neutral zone and blue line. It's like, you're supposed to settle in here, Petey. They traded JT Miller out of Vancouver. Now you can settle in. You're playing with your countrymates. huge disappointment. You talk about Adrian Kempe being a huge plus factor in this tournament for Sweden. Where has Elias Pettersson been? Like, that is one of the big headlines of this tournament. And I thought coming into this as well, if you have one soft team in this tournament, it's Sweden. And they're kind of living up to that reputation a lot here, Armando. That's a must-win game for them in regulation. All credit, full guard to the Finns, but like what Finland is icing out there on defense, having our guy Mikael play top pairing minutes, doing a great job doing it. But really, they're missing their top pairing in Finland with Ristolainen and Miro Heiskanen out due to injury. And I really felt for Finland there. But what a game performance by them. But Sweden, that's a lost opportunity. And your fate might be out of your hands after that Canada-Finland game, going into that final game of the tournament against the U.S.
Yeah, and for Team Sweden, that he's definitely someone that needs to just get something going for him here. It's just you think that in a tournament like this, you would see like that the compete level just elevate. Also, one player I want to pinpoint that has had another who was responsible for the goal to even the Dahlin goal, Joel Eriksson Ek. He is someone that's not profiled that big around the NHL, more of a defensive guy, but how much he battles and wins a lot of them for him, incredible. And then being parked on front of the net, and then when Lankinen let the juicy rebound, getting it back to Rasmus Dahlin, who was pinching, and then getting that goal for Team Sweden. That's another player that has also had a great tournament.
Line and Eriksson Ek started all the fireworks before the Canada-USA game, slashing each other, going at each other. They put Eriksson Ek in a headlock, but he was battling, and he is an underrated guy on power play where he works that bumper position like a Reinhart. It's kind of like a hybrid Reinhart and Tkachuk, because he'll be in front of the net for the tips and deflections, but he also works that bumper position. He's really good on the power play. That's a guy for Sweden that's balanced. It feels like there's certain individuals for Sweden pulling on the rope, but not all of them collectively. And that's where they have yet to find a win here in this Four Nations. They've been fortunate how this point system works to get these points through. But again, a guy like Elias Pettersson, I just want to get back on him. I'm sorry if I'm harping on him, but a guy 2 seasons ago that was put in the class of Aleksander Barkov and Jack Eichel. And you watch those 3 centermen, and it is such a huge drop off from what Petey is doing for Sweden here to where Eichel and Barkov now are in their careers, both Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah, for sure. And also credit to certain players who heard the noise after not getting even a shot on goal on their first matchup against USA. I mean, but this is also the fact that Sweden did not have their sticks on the ice for this one, for their power play goal, that feed to Mikko Rantanen from Patrick Laine. I mean, and also the deception that they created with Barkov going to the bumper, Sebastian Aho going to the point, and then just that feed. I mean, now we saw that Barkov had 5 shots on goal, against the USA, but then you see other guys starting to pick them up. Hintz had 2 shots on goal. Rantanen only had that 1 shot, which ended up in the back of the net. But then you see even Patrick Laine. He had that stretch pass to Etu right before that breakout. So now
starting to wake up a little bit, but he's got to do a lot more. Guys like Lundell and Lusto down the lineup showing the depth of Finland, and those guys winning board battles. We know how Finnish hockey is because we see it as Florida Panther fans. So many battles won, even in that game against US, in that first 20 to 40 minutes. You could say that was an even contest because of the forwards and how hard they have to work.
Absolutely.
Come back and help those defensemen that some of them really are bordering on not being NHL caliber type of guys. So great work by the Finland forwards, and just the gutsy effort to like pull that out. And of course that's a rival game for them, so they can get up for that. But full marks to Finland, and I'm just glad that they were able to get like a win in this tournament, being really shorthanded when it comes to injuries and things.
No doubt. So the fact that they're still in it and they have a fighting chance even for that, which we will discuss more and discuss all the scenarios of what could happen on Monday from TD Garden in Boston. We're going to do that all next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Select Quote. And in sports, having a winning strategy is everything. That's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Select Quote. They shop, you save. Third and final segment here on this Monday, February 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. It is President's Day here in the United States as four nations face off. We'll head into their final day of their round robin. First, it's Finland versus Canada at 1 p.m. and then the USA versus Sweden in the nightcap. And this feels a little different based on, especially because of the fact that Canada did not put Sweden away early in the first game, which now looks very important because if Canada doesn't get a regulation win, they're going to be spectators just like all of us watching USA versus Sweden. But here's the thing, Kirby. If one of Finland or Sweden get a regulation win, I'm also wondering how the U.S. manages everything for their nightcap game but at the same time, I'm under the impression that we're here to win. Even if they have their spot locked in, you're going to play to win. Connor Hellebuyck started Saturday. Are you going to really give him 4 days off before a final? I don't think so. I really don't. If you're the USA. Cale Makar is said that he's going to do his best to play from last time I saw from the tweets from the people there. But there's also the question, does Sam Bennett remain in the lineup for this one now that all the post whistle stuff is going to be over? It's going to really about being pinpoint focus on trying to advance and get a win, like I said, in regulation, because that is the way you guarantee as far as controlling your own destiny here for Canada. So, and part of me, Kirby, I wish the NHL made the call to switch the times for USA and Sweden to be the afternoon game, so that there would be both games would mean something for both. So, So I give you the floor on this about everything for all my people.
Yeah, to me, the ball is in Canada's court. You win in regulation. I think, don't they clinch the finals?
Yes, they do.
And it's against a team like I just talked about, Finland. All due respect, full marks to them. You can never underestimate that nation. They always come to play. But if you look at the team on paper, it shouldn't be a contest. You should come out there and make a statement. And you weren't able to do things offensively against US. This is where you bounce back and you go at this, at times, AHL defense that Finland is icing out there. And you go to work with the best players on the planet. So Canada doesn't do it. Even if Makar's in, Makar's out, is he 50%, whatever, you don't get the job done here. You don't deserve to win the tournament, right? And that's where it goes to the U.S. in the nightcap. How do you want to handle this game? Well, who was the coach that unlocked Connor Hellebuyck for his NHL career? None other than Paul Maurice. Mm-hmm. Paul Maurice would always go to Connor Hellebuyck and say, you want to start today or you want to sit? When he was in Winnipeg, I'm not sitting, I'm playing. That's Connor Hellebuyck's MO. That is his mindset. So they go to him and ask him to sit. I don't think he's sitting, because I've heard that for years. This guy is a horse, and that's why I love top-end goalies. I miss Roberto Luongo to this day, but we have Sergei Bobrovsky now. We're blessed to have him. When you have those horses in net, there's very few of them now in the NHL that say, give me the game. Give me the crease. I'm going in. I'm not sitting. So right there, that tells to me, if he's playing, U.S. is playing for keeps, and they don't want to lose any momentum by trying to say, hey, we want to avoid Canada, or we want to avoid this situation, and let's just give this game away. Now you got a situation like a Matthew Tkachuk where he might be a game time decision to sit out. So the lineup might be a little different, where you have Chris Kreider maybe being inserted into the lineup in a situation like that. But these are still best on best. And the way that especially Canada and U.S. are constructed, it's next man up, and you bring a guy in. We just saw with Thomas Harley, we talked about that. He was on vacation mode, and he came out. He played very well against the U.S. That's a tough situation to go into. You see all the fights happening. You get thrown into that type of fray. So I don't discount anyone that's in the lineup here. So we'll kind of get a feel for it and a sense for it. But And I get what you're saying if that Canada-Finland game was later to kind of like make the drama a little bit more compelling. But to me, the ball is completely in Canada's court here by being the superior team on paper here against Finland. And I know as Panther fans, we love our Florida Finns, but in Canada here, like you got to find a way to get it done, and you got to stay focused on that, and then move on to Thursday. And if you don't lose, if you don't win in regulation, or whatever, man, this tournament is. Oh man, like get your popcorn because everything is happening here. I said there could be some crazy things happening at the end of the game. There, you might have to pull your goal. If it's a tie game with Finland, Canada might. Would you think about pulling your goalie so you win in regulation?
Yeah,
like got to think of some crazy stuff here. And I thought this would come into play, and maybe that's where it comes into play on Monday.
I think of it because last year, I mean, 3-2-1 point system. It's a different mindset. I remember the Philadelphia Flyers last year pulling their goaltender because they had to win in regulation due to tiebreakers. But I mean, do you risk losing in regulation, not even giving yourself a chance? So that's a.
What do you do though? What do you do? Like,
I like that you asked that question.
You gotta leave it in your hands, right? Like if you leave it.
Yes,
right?
There is a part of me that agrees, but then there's a part of me is like. What if it goes the other way and you get 0, you're done.
And you're done. So you don't see it in any situation, like even like a thought of it. I'll say
less than 10% chance.
Okay.
I'll say that.
Has to be Mike Keenan there, or John Tortorella, or something like that running the bench.
Yeah.
Maybe not John Cooper, but
maybe. So Kevin Lankinen is gonna get the start again against Canada. So Matthew Tkachuk has already been ruled out for USA against Sweden. So we will see on whether he is going to play against in the final on Thursday. But hey, we've seen Matthew Tkachuk play through a broken sternum. It takes a lot for him to say, hey, I'm just not feeling right. So the 4 days in between, hopefully that's something that could. I don't think it'll necessarily heal whatever he's going through, but it's hopefully those days could help him at least be manageable on the ice and actually play to a level that he's able to without feeling a significant amount of pain for him. Sweden is non-committal on a starter against USA. They did say that pulling Gustavsson wasn't for performance reasons, which I found shocking.
I don't believe that because he wasn't good in warm-ups, and Sportsnet was calling out his warm-up. That was so bad. And they came off first period. So
the coach says one thing, but we believe another when it comes to that. But speaking of goaltenders, Jordan Binnington, 2 goals against. The bad one, the first one was not the best one that he gave up. But at the same time, John Cooper spoke about how well he played in overtime against Sweden, and then just answering some of the questions there. I think you also keep Jordan Binnington for the third game because, I mean, we're very familiar with the Boston Bruins and pulling Linus Ullmark for Jimmy Swayman in when it was too late. We knew at the time after the fact, but I feel like this could be a similar situation where, okay, you've gotten this far. Yeah, this is a short tournament, as we've spoken about so many times, but the fact that they didn't lose because of him on Saturday, I think you roll with him again going into this matchup against Finland for them. So I'm seeing Lankinen versus Jordan Binnington for this one. How about you?
I got a question for you here, Armando.
Okay.
Now this tournament is shifting from Montreal to Boston, right?
Panther
fans, we're very familiar with this rink. You know, what is Jordan Binnington familiar with this city and this rink about?
A road game 7.
Stanley Cup winner. And really was the 4th, 5th string goalie, I think, within the St. Louis system to start that year, comes in there. I remember because I won a hockey pool and he gave me a couple dollars in my pocket. I had him as my goalie that I picked up. So I always remember that. So that is the positive mojo I run with here. But I do look at it very practical here. He's allowed a lot of bad goals. He is a goalie that doesn't give me a lot of trust as a Canadian hockey fan because I do not love his fundamentals and his technique. But he is a battler. So he has allowed some goals that he shouldn't have allowed, and he has made the saves that maybe he shouldn't have made. So how do you think and how do you decipher that? And I use within our community with our post-game show after the Saturday games. Jordan Binnington, if he had a guy later in his stage of his career, like a Roberto Luongo, even a Marc-Andre Fleury, and I'm not huge on Marc-Andre Fleury, you might go to that guy because of his pedigree, even if they're maybe out of their form and out of their prime. That's where you maybe make the switch. But behind him is Adin Hill and Samuel Montembeault, which I don't think is going to see any action in this tournament. So to me, it's a very tough decision to make. I don't like the options necessarily behind. Now, Adin Hill, he's a former Stanley Cup winner. We obviously saw that. We don't love talking about that. But that would be the guy that they would go to. But I think there is enough there that you do lean Binnington. But I think he is on monitor watch here, period to period, game to game. This Finland game, if they find a way to survive and they go to the final, you've got to play it by period, game by game here. So yes, I'm fine with him getting the start and the nod, but I'm not super confident on it.
Yeah, it might be a situation where if you let one or two in the first 5 or 10 minutes, that you might see it early as a way of like, even if the goals aren't his fault and there's like a breakaway that results in one, it's like, hey, we got to tighten up and get the pucks in net, create traffic, get those second chances. It might be something like that. It's just like similar.
They might not go back to him. It might be Adin Hill from there on out if they find a way to win that game and they're in the championship.
Yeah, so that is going to be interesting to see. So we can't wait for Monday for this. So.
Good game there, Armando, on Saturday night. Congratulations to your nation. You got to be proud. We as Canadians always say Americans like to thump their chest and be very proud. You know, sometimes bordering on cockiness. You guys are backing it up. You're walking the walk. You're talking the talk, walking the walk. You're doing it all. So if this is the new age of American hockey, just want to tell everyone it's not going anywhere, because this window, as we talk about the Panthers Cup window, this window for American hockey isn't going anywhere. This is one of the youngest, if not youngest nation on best levels. And you've got embarrassment of riches that aren't even in this tournament. Some decisions that maybe guys should have been, but if you win the tournament, you don't care about that. Who was on the team, who wasn't on the team. The only nations or teams that talk about that are the ones that don't win.
That lose. Yep. Just like how every draft pick, every trade in a season, it's the same conversation. Just switch it to international hockey. And you know what, Kirby, I'm gonna say that we're gonna see a rematch. We will see a rematch on Thursday.
I can't make a score prediction right now. Yeah. I gotta see things play out here and everything like that. I did say Canada was not going to win in Montreal, and if they're in the championship, they'll come back and win. I did say that, but now it is against USA, and I know how formidable of an opponent it is. So we have to see all this play out. And the injuries, the Cale Makar situation is massive. The goaltending thing that we just talked about, a lot more question marks when it comes to Canada and these other nations than what USA has right now as they lead the group.
And again, I hope it's in the fashion of seeing an overtime win and then seeing a USA win against Sweden. So I want the drama. I want it. I really do.
we got enough drama as Panther fans. You're putting more on me now.
Yeah. So we will see. But Kirby, thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can follow you and all the great work that you do for this Florida Panthers community.
Yeah, and Armando, just thanks for having me on again today. I just want to give a shout out to your guy, Nick Fairbanks. Banksy always gives us a shout out. He's kind of part of our community, but I know he's like a main contributor for you guys. So always a shout out to Banksy there. Love having him on our post-game shows. So we go live post-game Panthers and even Four Nations here after games on the Twitter X platform. We have now migrated a little bit of our content over to YouTube. So we go live every Saturday night, usually around 11:30 Eastern time. I know it's late, but that's when all the games are done. And we went live after the Canada-USA game. The replays are up there. If you guys can't stay up late, make sure to check those out. We're on Instagram as well, Cats and Rats. But all of our links are in our link tree, and I know you'll put it in the show notes there. I appreciate everyone support there and for our sponsors and everything like that.
Awesome. Kirby, thank you so much, and I will see you again here soon.
Thanks, Armando.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steve Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Kirby Lupul, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.